the major problem that CEOs have is that HR do not understand the business, and then they propose things that is not aligned.
Hui Ming is the co-founder of Leaderonomics and an expert in the science of leadership and people management. Her leadership knowledge has been instrumental for Leaderonomics and its customers.
A big company can really move smoothly and seamlessly when those processes are actually well thought through and everyone kind of knows and adopts it and has a similar language of how we actually work for each division to flow well. You know, what the organization needs, what the people need became a process and it became a best practice that not just what we do internally, but we also share the best practices with our customers. Maybe I can share a couple of things. I think one thing that we really adopted from GE was
Hey, according to YouTube statistics, 98% of people who've watched this video are yet to subscribe to our channel. So, if you like this video and you like our channel, please do consider subscribing. Best part is, we're constantly uploading some great content on leadership, on learning, and so many great, wonderful stuff. So, do subscribe so that you'll get the latest, the greatest, all delivered to you.
Hi, Hui Ming. Good evening.
hello.
Welcome to the podcast session, right? So today this is part of a series of podcasts which we talk about leadership, transformation during challenging times, right? Performance, problems that we try to solve in supply chain and all that.
Basically everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a broad-based, but topics to discuss and things like that. So, I mean, I know you for more than 10 years now.
Yes,
You're one of the co-founders of Leaderonomics,
Yep.
right? We have had several occasions where we work together and so on and so forth. But I think what I wanted to talk to you about today, right, is you transitioning from management into an entrepreneur and how do you put in the science of management and science of performance into your organization, right? I thought you could share some of those stories over the last 10 years. I mean, years before that when you were in GE, right? And then over 10 years with Leaderonomics, so major milestone achievements that you have achieved.
Yes, in fact, this is our 15th year.
Yeah,
with
there you go.
Leaderonomics, right? Yeah. I can kind of share a bit of kind of how I started in the corporate world, but basically, I started actually with consulting in PwC before I actually joined GE. So it was kind of more of a consulting environment with a very organized and big organization. Going into GE, I think at that time GE was really a very big global company with lots of operations across the world. So a lot of things, being a 100-year-old company, is a lot of things were structured. There's so many processes. Everything has a system. Whether it's people management, there's lots of systems and kind of guidelines and best practices, all the way to how do you deal with customers, how do you deal with the products and even innovation. I was in the different businesses in GE, from aircraft from aviation to oil and gas to the banking, capital services, and also at the corporate functions also. And each one of it, although there are different processes, but globally as a whole group, it was also like having a standard process that cuts across all different, at that point in time was about 12 businesses, right? But all had a similar process, though there was some contextualization by each location and business. I must say that amount of structure really gave me a very good training to understand that a big company can really move smoothly and seamlessly when those processes are actually well thought through and everyone kind of knows and adopts it and has a similar language of how we actually work for each division to flow well. After spending about good 7-8 years in GE, and I moved from finance as a very pure numbers and finance person to human resources, also because of the very systematic people management methods that GE applied, whereby they are able to have really good dialogues with each talent and able to even identify the strengths of people. Such a big global company, and yet they can even go down to the individual to understand what is that person's potential and strength. So you can imagine how they can even move a finance person to
the
HR.
granular level.
Yes, correct.
I believe, so correct me if I'm wrong, so Jack Welch was the CEO at that time when you were in GE.
For a while, and then he was Jeff Immelt. Yeah.
Jeff Immelt.
Yeah.
So you experienced
transition.
it.
We went through the transition time. Yes, that's right.
But Jack Welch is the guy who's known as the one that made GE standardize and simplify a lot of the operations
Exactly.
and drive in the science of management, so to speak, right?
Yes, correct.
And also on leadership, right?
Yes. In fact, during his time is when GE was known as the leadership engine.
Correct,
Can you imagine
yes.
an engine works clockwise, clockworks, right? It's like, seamlessly smooth processes. Yeah.
Correct, yeah, because I do see that you and your colleague Roshanal, you guys use some of the lessons learned from GE, right? I mean, there's clearly, when you started Leaderonomics, it's about the science of leadership,
Yes, correct.
right?
Yes.
And that's your
Tagline.
right? And
That's right.
and then you add on to that from cradle to grave, right? So the whole objective of setting Leaderonomics up and driving that business and things like that is to bring about leadership. So that is pretty much the product. But running Leaderonomics also required you to implement the science of management, right?
Definitely.
Right. So can you tell me that story behind it, right?
Actually, I would say that when we started Leaderonomics, like at any startup, right, it was like bootstrap, very few people. And I would say that the initial couple of months, I must say that it was so fluid. I don't know the months or maybe the first year or two, it probably was so fluid. And there was, I would say, lack of a lot of processes. Also because in a startup environment, a lot of things have to be very creative, very resourceful, and we haven't established a lot of processes. Even though in our heads we know that there was a lot of things that we need to put in place, but you needed to just do everything that you need to get the company up and running. So I must say the first initial years would be very creative. And you don't have what we call structures or processes because you needed not to be bound by anything, but to explore everything first. But after a couple of years, once you kind of understand the industry, we've learned the traits of this, of how to go into leadership development in as a business. That's when we start to say, okay, for us to actually scale and to grow, and not to keep reinventing the wheel over and over again with the same customer or the same product, we started to put in what I call the science of management, from processes, templates, systems. It all came in year after year. I must say that it's growing pains where we had to learn and we had to even design out things that worked for a smaller organization. We can learn a lot of things from GE, a lot of best practices, a lot of, I would say, good structures and processes. But when it comes to a small organization, we have to tweak it and to make sure that it actually works for our context.
Yeah, because at the startup phase, or you're pretty much the master of all trades, right?
Yes, correct.
Right? Jack of all
We
trades.
do everything.
Right, but then as you find your stability in terms of this is a product that you're selling repeatedly, then you want to put a process behind it so that the inputs are all fixed, so that the outputs is predetermined, so that things don't go wrong, right? So as you were moving from your startup into a steady state, right? I mean, you're 15 years, so presumably the first 3 years was the startup, and then you were moving into your steady state, right? How much of the knowledge that you had from GE and the experience before that, you started bringing into Leaderonomics? That means in order to sell your science of leadership, you had to implement the science of management.
Yeah. Maybe I can share a couple of things. I think one thing that we really adopted from GE was we knew that culture was important. So one thing that we definitely knew that when in GE there was a really robust system and process to actually build a certain culture that made GE people GE. A way of working, a way of talking, a way of representing yourself. And that's what we actually did in Leaderonomics very strongly, is that we had our cultural beliefs and we ensured that was one thing that grounded everybody in terms of the way we work, the way we speak, the way we go to customer, the way we diagnose. So that's one thing that we knew was really good, and we adopted it in Leaderonomics. We also adopted a lot of things on performance management, because in GE it was really very strong in the area, like I told you earlier on, right? From a big company, you can somehow zoom into the individual's potential, the individual's performance, and even develop what I call individual development plans for a individual in the company that was very, very impactful, very relevant, and very personalized. So that we took in not just for Leaderonomics, but also for our customers.
Correct.
And
And if I'm not wrong, you and I had a visit to Alibaba once.
Oh,
and
yes.
and we saw how Alibaba actually had adopted the similar methodology that GE had in the past, right?
Yes. And I must say that not just from performance management, because I know, for example, we used to have what we call the talent matrix, where you are able to identify different people and kind of be able to assess their potential, their performance, and even their aspirations. That helped us to actually identify talent or someone that wants to be more of an incremental player, and how do you actually customize development plans for them. But not only that, I think there's also what we call the science of designing what we call interventions, leadership interventions for people. Like I said, we started off just based on experience. And then as we started to solidify our product and our services, even the process of diagnosing, what the organization needs, what the people need, became a process. And it became a best practice that not just what we do internally, but we also share the best practices with our customers. How do they diagnose the needs of people very well? And how do they actually design and then actually implement and deliver a solution that actually works for them? So all this is a framework as well.
So the science of leadership and science of management both has become products.
Yes, correct. Yes.
So one of the things during Jack Welch's time, right, where he came up with evaluating performance and high potential, but GE was also known to be ruthless, getting rid of the bottom 10%. Bottom 10%.
Yes, the bottom
right?
10%.
So how much of it did you adopt here?
Okay. Let me say that the framework we adopt and we also share with all our clients, and internally we do also, is what we call the 20-70-10 rule, right? So the 20% is top talent, the 70% is what we call the not the high, they're performers, they're performers, but maybe they not so aspirational to become senior leaders. And then we have what we call the bottom 10% that in GE, because it's a American company, so it's a little bit more ruthless, whereby yes, I can get rid of them. However, I think when you localize the model, so you cannot just take everything and just say, let's implement the same thing. You have to localize it. And I think in Malaysia and in Asia, the relationship factor is stronger also. And there's also more, I would say, the empathy level to always give people chances to try and up their abilities is there. And so I would say that although you adopt the same model, I think the way we approach what we call the 10% that maybe may not be performers is to really give them chances and to ensure we know the root cause of why they're not performing. Because non-performance can be an attitude issue, could be a behavior issue, could be a capability issue, or it could be job fit. That it wasn't their fault at all.
So
it could even be company's fault, right?
Yeah. So there's some measurements that you put in place.
Measurements, diagnosis tools, assessment tools to ensure that we identify the real root cause and work on it rather than say it's a human factor, it's just a pure human factor issue. Yeah.
Because you can see a major difference. Some companies, when they identify the bottom ranks, they put them into a PIP before making a decision, right? So give them a chance. So there's some form of empathy.
Yes.
Right. I believe at that time in GE, that was not there, right? So if you don't make the cut and say, you have a chat and say, mate, this doesn't fit, right? You don't fit in our culture. And
there is a small process, maybe not, the runway is not so long, shorter runway, but there's those dialogues and discussion that takes place.
Yeah. So let's talk about the culture, right? Do you think that kind of system in place, the GE system, would work in companies in this region or Malaysia, for example? Short runway.
Short runway, yeah. Actually, I think in today's context where change is happening so fast, it might be something that should be more adoptable in a sense. And I say it because I feel that today we also have a lot more data and a lot more technology that gives you enough information to understand people, understand performance better, and it's going to be a very objective call. I feel that today that process actually can be shortened if we have right information to make the right decisions, or even have the right information to have the right performance discussions or the right coaching to be done. And that can be more targeted versus, if you don't have enough, then you need to give longer runway because you're just not sure how to make that call. But today you have a lot more information on your hands to say, I can make a very firm and objective call. Plus, the fact that there's so many processes in HR today to even help people exit and to help people to find something that suits them. I think that process actually can be accelerated, just whether or not we have a culture of having those courageous conversations.
Correct, but do you think it's a good habit for organizations to have?
I believe it is. I believe we do need to have that. For organizations to progress and to keep moving forward, this methods need to be there.
Yeah, because I always look at it as a bell curve, me being on the statistician side of me. So there's always the 16% of top performers and the lower 16% of non-performers. Then you have 32 in between, right? But not having it, I think, is a problem.
It's even worse, yeah.
Yeah,
Then you can also, if you don't do it, you also discourage the top performers.
Correct, yeah.
Right?
Because then you pull the whole team down.
Correct.
And I think
The strength of a team is the strength of the weakest link, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. So how much of that culture that you have established in Leaderonomics also helps you to articulate how you do or how do you offer your services and products to your clients?
I think a lot
That
of the
aspect of the culture.
So I think when we go into any organization, although we have a certain culture that we believe is best, we always start with diagnosing what the customer's culture is and what the customer's business imperatives are. And then to say, what do we actually propose as a solution for the customers, making sure that the pace of change or interventions is also acceptable. So processes that we know in terms of performance management or whether in terms of talent development, we share it, but we also make sure that we are able to say, where are you now and where you want to get to? So we have to meet them at where they are at their levels and then slowly kind of introduce what we call small baby steps of processes in first. And then if the basic foundations are not there, then we build in the foundations first. And then only on top of that do we add on what we call more sophisticated tools or processes for them to actually adopt.
So here we are talking about two things at the same time, right? We are talking about the science of leadership because you go in and trying to help, talents and develop themselves. But can you do the science or implement the science of leadership without the science of management?
So we have this model that talks about the science of transforming organizations, and it has 4 different aspects that we look at. Leadership, one aspect, business acumen, or we call it the business model of the organization. Like you say, it has to have some processes there. We look at what we call system and structures, and at the same time, we also look at the culture. So we say there are 4 different areas that's very critical for an organization to move forward, and it blends both the leadership and culture, which is the soft skills part, which people think is the art, but it's actually the science there. And then we have the business model together with the system and structures, which is also what we call then the science of management. The 2 of it combined together is a powerful force, and neither of it can be independent of each. Leadership can't be, even in leadership is great, but your business model and your system and process is not there. No point, right? Likewise, the other way around. Great business model, no leadership. You're also headed towards disaster.
You need both, right? And
Yes.
And I believe you had to implement that in-house first before you took it out, right?
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
and
We had to, although I would say the pain of putting in processes was not easy. Because I think people like freedom. People like to be able to explore and to,
because the startup years is the most fun years, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
and then trying to convert people's mindset to say now there are certain processes you have to follow. It took time for people to actually adopt, whether you introduce, let's say, technology or introduce databases. It took time for people to actually kind of adopt it. Yeah.
So let's just focus a little bit on the business model and the systems and processes, right? So for any organization and within what you have experienced, right, how much they can do without it?
Ooh. How much they can do without it?
Yeah. Do you think in today's world where everything is haywire, can be very turbulent, do you think businesses can survive without it?
I don't think, I think they can survive short term, but eventually the
Short term
chaos,
means they're just winging it.
yeah, for sustainability, it will definitely not be good, whether it's for the business or even for the people. Because when things are so fluid, And sometimes, honestly, I will have to admit, in Leaderonomics, we are still very fluid at whenever it comes to incubators and creating new things. I think what it does, it leads to people being overworked and overwhelmed with the uncertainty and a lot of duplication of work because everyone's doing everything. If there's no structure, you find a lot of wastages happening from your time wastage, the efficiency. You do one thing, you do actually they could have talked and there's a process. You didn't have to kind of overlap on people's work. So you can work. It's just that it's very, very inefficient, very ineffective, and probably the growth will be stunted because you can't move beyond having to keep doing things over and over again.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because the tendency without having one would mean that you start to create silos. Then you create rogue leaders and dinosaurs in dinosaurs organization.
I think you have the heroes, and then you also have those who okay lah, I'll just follow.
Those that it's like, this is my area, I'm the expert here. I don't want to work with you, and so on and so forth. And
I guess that's what it creates. But then you fail on the other side of leadership, right?
Correct. So then you fail on the culture, on the soft side, and
that's right.
Yes. And I think that's detrimental. So and in terms of what you guys do, right, the science of leadership needs to also go hand in hand with the science of management.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I guess you explained it well with the 4 different areas that you're doing, right? And before we wrap up, but how much of learning and development can be put into the science of management?
I actually think learning and
your opinion first before going about what Leaderonomics does, right? But
I would say, in my opinion, probably similar to what we're adopting in the organization is that we do believe that learning and development must always be aligned to the business objectives and the business goal.
Yeah.
If it's a standalone, that is as good as useless. So we always start by understanding where is the business headed, what is their goals, and the learning and development will actually be aligned and designed to ensure that people's welfare and people's development is actually not just, it must be two-pronged. It has to achieve the individual's growth path, but also it must be aligned to where the organization wants the leaders to grow towards. So I must say that that the business and product comes first, and then the needs of the people and that strategy has to be actually aligned. Yeah.
I mean, given that you are in this line of business and you would have seen what's out there in the market, right? Do you have a sense that there's still lack of knowledge in terms of how to do this properly? Because in terms of identifying what's actually needed within an organization, and there's a lot of education even for the HR or those that are responsible for learning and development, making sure that they understand the 4 areas. One is the soft side, 2 soft sides and 2 technical or hard sides, so to speak, right?
I would say that a lot of the bigger organizations that have a matured HR team are pretty well versed in this area, and they've started to. I would say that a lot of HR. I would say, if say 5 years ago, a lot of HR, the major problem that CEOs have is that HR do not understand the business, and then they propose things that is not aligned. But I must say today, that a lot of HR people have already, all HR leaders, CHROs are very, very much attuned to what the organization needs, and they have become what we call a real business partner. You have the right and left hand, right? The CFO and the HR person. These two must really work with the CEO to get the organization forward. Where I see it lacking probably is going to be where the SMEs are. I must say the SMEs really, there's just not enough capacity or capability that I think where the help is needed is actually there to help them to even have a bit more structure and a bit more systematic way of developing their leaders. Because that's our biggest market actually. At the same time, that's also where the people development is still lacking. So I would think that the gap is there, and there's definitely a great opportunity to actually help.
And I believe during your times in GE, HR had a very important role, right?
Very important, yes.
Right? And I remember watching videos from Jack Welch, right? He believes that HR has 2 roles. One is to nurture, to be like a parent, and the other role that a HR has to play also to be a pastor. So that means can take in confessions, listen, keep things where it needs to be, and then guide people into the right direction, right?
HR is supposed to be the most trusted person in the organization.
Correct.
Whereas a lot of organizations, sometimes HR is the one that people don't want to talk to. But in GE, we have a culture of making sure that we are approachable. There's an open door concept, and that people can talk about their careers very openly, whether it's within the company or even they're seeking external opportunities. Yeah. So the role is, like you say, it's both parent and pastor. Yeah.
Correct. So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in today's world, right, when we talk about science of leadership and the science of management, HR is at the center of it, right? And they need to be a pastor and a parent at the same time.
Both.
Right?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
On that
Plus
note,
a business leader.
Yeah.
All in. Not just the soft stuff, but yes, correct. Yeah. So Arul, I know you asked me a lot of questions about the science of, leadership and people management. I know that you're an expert in processes and in Six Sigma. How would you implement that amount of detail of structure and processes into people management?
Okay, so depending on which area, right? So today I believe that if I had a chance, right, or I'm leading an organization, the number one partner that I would make sure that's involved in anything is HR. And I would guide the HR to function as the pastor and a parent.
Okay.
Right? So the parent is so that they nurture all the workforce,
Sure.
right? Wear the nurturing hat, identify what is needed, what is required to drive the business, right? And the pastor is to get all the feedback, because in any organization, there's all sorts of situations, grievances, unhappiness and things like that, right? But if you don't communicate, you don't talk, and you don't allow people to come and let go, give feedback, give inputs, then you can't do that, right? In my experience, that is the hardest thing for HR to do, because most of the HR leaders don't want to get emotionally involved with employees, right? But it goes back to being empathic, having empathy and being generous. And this I think I hear it a lot from Jack Welch during his time, right? He says that you must have a generosity gene. Right.
Yes,
so if you can't be
yes.
both a pastor and a parent, then how are you going to be very difficult? So this is purely soft. Even I could train a black belt to solve a major problem, right? But if that person, he or she, if she doesn't have that generosity gene to pull up the team and say, hey, let's do this, right? We're going to deliver this, and this is the value. Then if there's a problem, this person is going to keep the problem to themselves, right? And the team will disrupt the team. And the best intervention is HR, right?
Okay.
And if the HR doesn't get involved and doesn't wear the pastor's hat or the parent's hat at that time, then the whole thing will collapse. And I've seen it. I've seen it collapse, right? And some organizations, HR doesn't even get involved in it, right?
Okay. So let's say that you have that species of HR, okay, the ideal HR. How can you advise them to even be better? Because they already have what we say, the empathy and the role, wearing two hats. How would you be able to advise them to use some process tools, even to make the HR function even stronger as a business partner?
Correct. I mean, and today when we talk about HR and doing appraisals, for example, right? And it's not just setting the objectives and then year-end evaluating whether it's going through periodically, every period, every quarter, or at least half yearly, and seeing that, having that dialogue with the individual, right? Or at least training a team that goes and does the dialogue to see that, okay, where are the gaps, what the organization can do to help, right?
Okay.
Because, as leaders, you're supposed to move barriers, right?
Yeah.
So HR also has a role of removing barriers. You cannot leave that, or barriers has to be done by functional heads, right?
Yeah.
There could be barriers which is cultural, right?
Yes.
There could be barriers which could be technical. There could be barriers which could be political, right?
Yes.
So, for example, if you are in an organization where the head of HR is a political personality, they will never be a pastor nor a parent, right?
Yeah, and I love how you kind of position it whereby the HR person actually brings in intel and data that cannot be found anywhere else.
Yeah, because
and that's
they
through
have,
conversations, through dialogues, you pick up all the very internal or intrinsic data points that you cannot find from systems or from inputs, but it's like that dialogue itself.
So you need to be personal at the same time being impersonal.
Yes. is the
Right,
toughest
so-
role to be, right?
yeah,
How do you be
so-
objective and yet empathetic? So I think that's a very fine line to actually work on.
I guess I spend a lot of time coaching and developing people, so I have a very strong passion when it comes to learning and development, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I guess that's one of my better successes over the years.
And I've seen you build the team. I've seen you build that team, and you've had to pass your knowledge down as well. You transferred knowledge,
Yeah.
you transferred experience. I've seen you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I enjoy. But then it's not the same as what you would see HR. So there's still a lot of opportunity for HRs to move in that direction, right? It's modernizing, like what you say, they're now business partners. They understand businesses more than anything else. But if you talk about, opportunity, right?
Yeah.
I think there's still a lot more opportunity within the HR area as well.
Agree. Totally agree.
Good.
Thanks.